Family, let me take you somewhere today. I know the title might have made you raise an eyebrow. 6 house smells that scream a witch lives there. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about potions or broomsticks. We're here to talk about the atmosphere of your life. You see, just like a house carries a scent, subtle or strong, your soul, your mindset, your spirit carries one too. And some of us are living in atmospheres we didn't even know were toxic. Not because of what's in the air, but because of what's been allowed to linger in our hearts. There are smells that don't just cling to curtains or furniture. They cling to your identity. Bitterness has a smell. Control has a scent. Fear, manipulation, secrecy. Oh, they all have aromas. And baby, they linger. These are not the perfumes of a free woman. These are the stenches of someone bound. Someone trying to manifest peace while living in chaos. But what if I told you the witch is not some dark figure outside your door? What if she's the version of you that has normalized dysfunction, seduced by survival, and called it strength? Today, we're going to identify those 6 spiritual scents, the ones that scream of warfare, not worship. We're going to walk room by room, scent by scent, and call that thing out. Because freedom starts when you smell the shift and decide to air out what no longer serves your purpose. God didn't call you to live under the same ceiling as spiritual strongholds. It's time to cleanse the atmosphere and reclaim the house that is your soul. Bitterness doesn't just show up in your words. It hangs in the air like a thick, sour scent that refuses to fade. You ever walked into a room and felt tension before a single word was said? That's bitterness. It's spiritual mold. It grows in dark, damp places, usually where pain was never addressed, where offense was allowed to settle, and where forgiveness was delayed so long that it decayed into resentment. Bitterness is not loud, but it's heavy. It doesn't always scream, but it stains everything around it. And if you're not careful, you'll start mistaking its smell for your normal. Some of us have lived in bitterness so long, we've convinced ourselves it's our personality. I'm just guarded. I don't trust people easily. I'm a realist. But truth be told, that's not protection. That's preservation of pain, and it has a scent. A house where bitterness lives will often feel cold, even when it's warm. Isolated, even in a crowd, quiet, even when there's conversation. That's because bitterness silences joy. It can't coexist with celebration. Every time something good tries to enter, bitterness reminds you why you should remain suspicious. It keeps receipts on every wrong ever done to you and plays them back like background music to your life. Bitterness is spiritual mildew. It doesn't always announce itself with drama. It creeps in quietly after the offense, after the betrayal, after the heartbreak. It tells you you're protecting yourself when really you're imprisoning yourself. And the longer it sits, the more it alters the atmosphere. People can smell it in your tone, in your hesitation to open up, in your backhanded compliments and sarcastic laughter. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you've been hurt. But hear me clearly, healing is not passive. It's not just about time. It's about tending to the wounds that time alone can't fix. Bitterness always begins with something that felt unfair, something you didn't deserve. Maybe they walked away without explanation. Maybe you were overlooked, undervalued, betrayed, silenced. And while those feelings are valid, bitterness forms when we begin to nurture that pain like a pet instead of surrendering it. It smells like pride masquerading as self-righteousness, I would never do that to someone. They don't deserve my forgiveness. But here's the truth. Bitterness keeps you tied to people and moments that God already released you from. You're free, but the scent of your soul says otherwise. The scariest thing about bitterness is how it distorts your discernment. You start filtering every new opportunity, every new relationship through the odor of an old offense. You don't even realize how many blessings you've pushed away, how many doors you've closed, simply because you didn't deal with what hurt you. Bitterness numbs your ability to hope. It replaces faith with cynicism and vision with vengeance. The problem is, vengeance doesn't heal, it hardens. And slowly, your house, your inner life, starts to reek of distrust, guardedness, and emotional isolation. Control smells sterile, not clean, sterile, lifeless. It's the scent of a house where everything looks perfect, but nothing feels free. It's that overly polished atmosphere where the furniture never moves, where laughter sounds rehearsed, and where spontaneity is viewed as a threat instead of a gift. Control is subtle in its entrance, but loud in its presence. It fills the room with anxiety masked as order, fear disguised as structure. And often, it's rooted in trauma. Somewhere, at some point, life taught you that if you don't take the reins, everything falls apart. And now control has become your... People who live in control often don't realize they're not leading, they're gripping. They grip relationships, they grip timelines, they grip outcomes. And when God tries to move, they stiffen. They call it stewardship, but what it really is spiritual micromanagement. The atmosphere gets tight, conversations feel like they're walking on eggshells, joy feels monitored, peace is conditional. The spirit of control is exhausting because it constantly demands that everything conforms to a script you wrote without asking God if He offered it. Control is seductive. It tells you if you plan well enough, no one can hurt you. If you work hard enough, you won't be disappointed. If you stay one step ahead, you'll never feel betrayed again. And so you overplan, overthink, overcompensate. You don't delegate because no one does it like you. You don't trust because trust feels like handing over power. You don't rest because rest means surrender. And control never surrenders. It only tightens its grip. It's the smell of a house where the Holy Spirit is present but not welcome to lead. He's allowed to visit but not allowed to rearrange anything. You might call it excellence, but if you look closer, it's perfectionism dressed up in spiritual language. It's a fear of vulnerability, a fear of being seen as incapable or messy or weak. And so you curate every moment, rehearse every word, dress every wound in performance. But control doesn't protect you. It isolates you. It builds walls instead of bridges. And eventually, people feel more like employees than loved ones. Relationships suffer because no one feels safe to show up authentically. And that smell, the smell of control, starts to overpower the fragrance of grace. Control creates an environment where God has to break in instead of being invited in. Where every miracle has to be predictable to be believed. Where you treat interruptions as insults rather than invitations. And deep down, the saddest part is that control often comes from a place of deep disappointment. Something didn't go the way you prayed. Someone fail you when they should have covered you. So now you hold everything too tightly. Your time, your emotions, your future. You keep your hands so close that even blessings can't get in. The air in the house grows thin. The atmosphere becomes one where nothing flows freely. Not love, not creativity, not joy. Fear has a smell. It's cold, stale, and hard to ignore once it settles in. It's the scent of a house where the windows stay closed even on sunny days, where doors are locked from the inside, not for safety, but for isolation. Fear is a spiritual scent that doesn't just haunt people, it inhabits them. It shifts the way they walk, the way they speak, the way they hope. It paralyzes the atmosphere. Nothing moves freely in a house filled with fear. There's hesitation in every decision, second guessing in every step, and a quiet panic that lives beneath every prayer. It's not that God's not present. It's that fear's voice has been turned up louder than faith's whisper. Fear can smell like anxiety, but it can also smell like control, perfectionism, procrastination, or even apathy. It's a shapeshifter. It tells you it's caution when really it's captivity. It'll disguise itself as wisdom when what it really is worry. And if you live with fear long enough, you start adapting your life around it. You start calling fear discernment, when it's really just a pattern of avoiding obedience. You stop applying, stop showing up, stop risking, stop believing. The house becomes quiet, not peaceful, but heavy. It's the silence that comes when dreams have been shelved and courage has been shut down. Fear smells like regret waiting to happen. It fills the room with what ifs and should haves. It robs you in advance before you even step into opportunity. And the irony is, the more you feed it, the more real it feels. You can decorate a fearful life with affirmations and declarations, but until you confront the root, the atmosphere won't change. Fear makes you bow in rooms where God called you to speak. It makes you shrink in spaces where He called you to expand. It doesn't just stunt your growth, it sabotages your identity. There's also a fear that comes from spiritual deception. The lie that you're not enough, that God's promises won't hold for you, that if you take the leap, there won't be a net. That kind of fear is heavy. It hangs in the corners of your heart like smoke, filling your lungs with doubt. You start coughing up reasons why you can't. You begin choking on memories of failure. And you stay small, not because you lack potential, but because you've been breathing in the lies for so long, you've forgotten what freedom smells like. Sometimes the scent of fear lingers after a loss. Loss of trust, loss of control, loss of love. You start building your life around avoiding pain rather than pursuing purpose. You stop dreaming bold dreams. You silence your own voice before anyone else can. And in that space, fear sets up furniture. It becomes a permanent resident, not a visitor. The presence of fear doesn't just block blessings, it builds barriers between you and the very things you've been praying for. Fear keeps you pacing in the hallway while your breakthrough is waiting in the room next door. Manipulation has a smell that's both sweet and sour. A deceptive fragrance that draws you in, only to leave you unsettled once you realize the truth. It's the scent of a house where words are weapons disguised as kindness, where favors come with strings, and where love feels conditional. Manipulation isn't always loud or obvious. Often it's quiet and cunning, weaving itself into conversations, relationships, and decisions like an invisible thread, pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's a spiritual poison that corrodes trust and distorts intentions, leaving an atmosphere heavy with suspicion and guarded hearts. People who live under manipulation often don't see it at first. It starts small, little nudges, gentle guilt trips, subtle suggestions that shape your actions without your full consent. Manipulation thrives on insecurity, on the need to control outcomes without appearing controlling. It's the scent of a house where transparency is sacrificed for appearance, where honesty is bent to serve an agenda, and where true freedom is traded for the illusion of peace. And the most painful part is that manipulation often comes disguised as care, as protection, or even as love. You start to question your own feelings and judgments because the manipulator has been so consistent at twisting the narrative. Manipulation leaves behind a residue of confusion. You feel torn between wanting to trust and knowing deep down something isn't right. You second guess your own memories, your decisions, your instincts. That smell lingers in your mind like smoke after a fire, clouding your clarity and weakening your confidence. It makes you doubt your worth and question your reality. In the spiritual realm, manipulation is a strong hold that keeps you bound in cycles of emotional and mental bondage, preventing you from walking in the freedom God intended. This sense of manipulation also poisons relationships. It builds invisible walls where open communication should flow. It creates power imbalances disguised as care or responsibility. The manipulator often feels justified, believing they are protecting you from harm or making decisions for your best interest. But in truth, they are trying to control the narrative to maintain their own position of power. This dynamic erodes mutual respect and stifles genuine connection. People living in this atmosphere often feel unseen, unheard, and misunderstood, trapped in roles dictated by someone else's agenda. Manipulation is closely tied to fear of losing control, fear of abandonment, fear of being powerless, and it's born out of a heart that has learned to survive by bending others to its will. The spiritual danger is that it blocks the flow of God's love and truth. When manipulation rules the atmosphere, grace cannot fully enter. Instead of trust, there is suspicion. Instead of freedom, there is bondage. Instead of peace, there is unrest. The scent of manipulation chokes out authenticity and stifles growth, turning a house into a prison where the spirit cannot thrive. Those who recognize this smell must be courageous enough to confront it. They must learn to set boundaries, to speak truth, and to seek freedom not just for themselves, but for everyone living in that space. Because manipulation is not just an individual issue. It's a spiritual condition that affects entire households and communities. It's a chain that must be broken if healing and restoration are to take place. Recognizing this scent is the first step toward cleansing the air and reclaiming the atmosphere for peace, love, and genuine connection. Secrecy and shame carry a scent that is heavy and suffocating, like a thick fog that settles over every corner of a house and never lifts. It's the smell of shadows, dark, hiding places where truth is locked away and vulnerability is punished. A home where secrecy reigns is one where people live behind masks, afraid to show their real selves for fear of judgment or rejection. Shame is the scent that lingers when you believe that if others knew your deepest struggles, your failures, or your past mistakes, they wouldn't love you anymore. This kind of atmosphere is a breeding ground for loneliness and isolation because it convinces you that you must carry your burdens alone. The connection between secrecy and shame is like a vicious cycle. Shame convinces you to hide the parts of yourself you think are unworthy or broken, and secrecy becomes the means to keep that shame locked away. But secrecy doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. It creates walls that block out healing and connection. When you keep your struggles hidden, the pain festers inside, growing heavier with each secret you bury. This atmosphere is cold and uninviting because it's built on fear. The fear that if the truth comes out, you'll be abandoned or condemned. People living in this environment often feel like they are walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring what they say and do to avoid exposing their hidden wounds. The scent of shame is particularly deceptive because it whispers lies that make you feel alone and defective. It tells you that you are the problem, that your flaws define you, and that no one can truly accept you as you are. It robs you of your identity, replacing your sense of worth with guilt and self-condemnation. When shame controls the atmosphere, it's hard to breathe freely or speak openly. People might smile on the outside, but inside they're weighed down by the heavy burden of not enough. This weight drains energy and stifles joy, making it difficult to fully engage in life or relationships. Secrecy, too, has a corrosive effect on trust. When people hide parts of themselves, it creates distance and suspicion. Even the closest relationships can become fragile because there is always the sense that something important is being withheld. The smell of secrecy makes it hard to build genuine intimacy because vulnerability is the foundation of true connection. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken truths and half-told stories. And that tension is felt even if it's never discussed. In spiritual terms, secrecy and shame block the flow of God's healing grace. They prevent people from stepping into the freedom and forgiveness that God offers. The Bible tells us to bring our hidden things into the light so they can be healed. But secrecy keeps everything in the dark. Shame convinces us that we are beyond redemption, but God's love says otherwise. When shame dominates, it's hard to receive that love fully because you believed you are undeserving. This spiritual blockage keeps people trapped in cycles of guilt and self-rejection, unable to walk boldly in their identity as beloved children of God. Breaking free from the smell of secrecy and shame requires courage to be vulnerable and honesty with ourselves and others. It means creating spaces where people can bring their whole selves without fear of rejection. It means refusing to carry hidden burdens alone and learning to share them with trusted friends, mentors, or counselors. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the process of cleansing the atmosphere, making room for healing, restoration, and authentic connection. Spiritual apathy carries a subtle but powerful scent, a kind of stale, dry air that drains the life out of a house before you even notice it. It's the smell of a space where things used to move, grow, and flourish, but now feel stuck, uninspired, and disconnected. It's the absence of zeal, the quiet acceptance of mediocrity, and the slow fading of passion for things that once ignited your soul. When spiritual apathy settles in, it's like the windows have been closed and the blinds drawn. The light of God's presence struggles to enter, and the atmosphere becomes heavy with indifference. This scent often begins quietly. It's not a loud rebellion or a dramatic falling away, but a slow drifting away from intentional faith and purposeful living. It's the yawning boredom that replaces worship, the half-hearted prayers the skipped devotions, the moments when you're physically present but spiritually checked out. Spiritual apathy numbs your sensitivity to God's voice and dulls your hunger for his presence. It's the place where routine replaces revelation and obligation replaces passion. Over time, it erodes your relationship with God, leaving you feeling empty even in the midst of religious activity. One of the most dangerous things about spiritual apathy is how it masks itself as contentment or peace. You might convince yourself that you're okay, that you're simply in a season of rest or waiting. But apathy is not peace. It's a deadening of the spirit. It's the spiritual equivalent of stagnation, where nothing new grows and nothing changes. It dulls your ability to recognize God's movement in your life and blinds you to opportunities for growth and breakthrough. The house smells stale because the atmosphere is no longer charged with expectation or faith. Spiritual apathy also affects how you engage with the people around you. It steals your enthusiasm for community, for serving, for encouraging others. You might find yourself withdrawing, avoiding deep conversations, or settling for surface-level relationships. The energy that once fueled your mission to impact the world slowly dissipates, replaced by a kind of spiritual fatigue. It's hard to fight for others when you're not even fighting for yourself. The house becomes a place where faith feels like a checklist rather than a fire. And that scent of complacency can infect everyone living there. Apathy can also be a defense mechanism, a way to protect yourself from disappointment, rejection, or pain. When the storms of life come and prayers seem unanswered, it's easier to give up than to keep hoping. But giving up leads to the slow decay of faith. The smell of spiritual apathy is like smoke from a fire that's almost gone out. It's the warning sign that the fire needs to be rekindled, that the heart needs to be stirred. Without that rekindling, the spirit remains cold and the atmosphere stays lifeless. God's desire is for us to live in vibrant, passionate faith, to have hearts that burn with love, hope, and purpose. When spiritual apathy sets in, it's a signal that something needs to change. It calls for intentional re-engagement with God's word, with prayer, with worship, and with community. It requires a willingness to be honest about where we are and to ask God to renew our passion and restore our joy. Only then can the air be cleared, the stale scent lifted, and the house once again filled with the fragrance of life and hope.